My name's Tom Blomstrom. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for White Marsh Township. It's the first event that the township's having of this nature since the township has preserved the property. And so it's a big deal. And obviously Frederick, that was him jumping for joy. He just didn't realize he didn't have the feet at this point. I just want to thank you all so much, and I know a couple of hiccups this morning logistically, but it's, again, our first time, and we were trying to get everybody bused here safely and get the word out of how to do that, because there's not appropriate infrastructure for parking and access yet, but we're working on it. The township's doing a great job with the Abolition Hall Steering Committee making that all come together. I do want to introduce to you that we have in the back our township manager, Craig McAnally, who's here today. You saw Franco walking around. He does a bunch for us for everything with Parks and Rec. And also Nick Delaney was your bus tour guide on the way over. And also J.C. Toll, who is the chair of our Board of Supervisors, is with us today, and just a wonderful leader for the township and the community and everything that we do. So help yourself to more chips and water if you need it, but I'll get out of the way and we'll turn things over to, I've been very blessed to know Jim, not only professionally through this, but as a friend since we were in our 20s. Really fortunate because I called him up when this was all coming together, and he went and created and wrote this whole script for us today. So very happy to turn him. He's been speaking throughout the region and over in Jersey as well regarding the 250th and all the amazing history he knows. So I'll turn it over to Local History Geek, Jim Segrave-Daly.
Thank you.
My man.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for showing up. Thanks to White Marsh Township, for putting this together. If you can't tell by my dress, this is going to be pretty informal. If you have questions, stop me, okay? I'm the 9th of 11 kids. I did not get the chance to speak growing up unless I was hurt or hungry. It's usually one more than the other. But truly, if you have a question or a comment at any point, please stop me. As Tom said, my name's Jim Segrave-Daly. I have a BA in history from Penn State. I have been a volunteer history teacher in Havertown, where I live, since about 2008. And I have been speaking nationally since about 2015. Libraries, historical societies, civic organizations, you name it. So today we are going to talk about, very appropriate one that we're in this great space, on Juneteenth. We'll start with a quick overview of what Juneteenth is all about, and then we'll get into the presentation itself. So Juneteenth marks the day in 1865 when Union troops let the enslaved in Texas, particularly in Galveston, Texas, know about the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation Proclamation first comes to light, if you will. It's passed on January 1st, 1863. Think of where Galveston is, right? One, if you've never been there, highly recommend. It's gorgeous, absolutely beautiful on the Gulf. But it is literally about as far away from Lincoln and DC and everything else that you can get, right? So word traveled very slowly. The other thing is that at that time, there was not a great Union Army footprint in Texas, right? And of course, 1865, the war's basically over at that point. But it takes a while for word to get there. So what happens is a Major General Gordon Granger lands in Galveston and reads what is known as General Order Number 3, which finally freed the more than 250,000 enslaved people in Texas. Juneteenth is often called the Second Independence Day because of it. So that's where we are today, and again, it's an honor to be here. What we're going to talk about, the title of the talk is Forgotten Patriots. So we're going to talk about African Americans who served, and we're not only talking militarily, but contributed to the cause, also those who served with the British. And we'll talk about the reasons why. We're also going to talk about Native American tribes who are really caught between a rock and a hard place. And we'll start in a second with this to explain that. And then I thought it would be appropriate, one, because I have 5 sisters and they would probably kill me if I didn't do this, but I will also want to, we'll wrap up talking about maybe half a dozen women who made key contributions during the revolution, because women play an absolutely vital role, particularly because men are away, right? Whether they're serving in Congress, whether they're actually serving in the army, whatever it may be, and women are truly running family farms. They are keeping the family unit together, cohesive, and then we're going to talk about some other women who actually fight in the war. And some names will be familiar, some may not. But where we're going to start is the French and Indian War, which is also known as the 7 Years' War, 1755 to 1763. New France in the green here, it's the French, Native American tribes fighting against the British, the colonists, who all consider themselves British, and Native American tribes as well. The Iroquois nation at that time is, again, between the rock and the hard place, because this is the settlement along the coast, right? Makes sense of the British colonies. Their fear is now, as time goes forward, it's pressing further and further west onto Native American lands. So the tribes are saying, we really don't have a good choice here. If the French win, they're going to keep this entire area, right? If the British win, of course they're going to get it, and the British do win. It really is, the whole thing starts out here at Fort Duquesne, which is modern-day Pittsburgh. Any guesses which future famous Continental Commander-in-Chief, Continental Army Commander-in-Chief, and first President of the United States starts the French and Indian War? George Washington. Washington is sent out by the governor of Virginia to Pittsburgh. Crazy, Virginia thought they had land rights in Western PA. All of the colonies were fighting amongst themselves saying, no, that's our land. PA, I live in Havertown, but I grew up in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area. Connecticut had a claim to the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area during the Revolution. And it's not like Connecticut is next door, right? So just to give you an idea of how all of the colonies are doing various land grabs, or trying to. So Washington, who initially tries to enroll in the British Army, but is told thanks but no thanks, is now in the colonial Virginia militia. The governor sends him out to Pittsburgh, where there are basically French squatters at Fort Duquesne, with a letter saying, beat it. Washington brings the letter out, and the French say, you beat it. So he turns around, goes back to Virginia, comes out with troops, and General Braddock. Braddock is a noted British general at this time. He's killed in battle. Washington ambushes the French and starts truly what is the First World War. Because here in America, yes, it's the French and the British and Native American tribes. In Europe, it's everybody. So that's, in Europe, it's called the 7 Years' War. Here it's called the French and Indian War. And they are literally fighting for, think of basically Pittsburgh out to Detroit. And what they're looking for control of, waterways, right? Think of the 3 rivers in Pittsburgh. There is no Pennsylvania Turnpike. Maybe that's a good thing, right? The main mode of travel, other than overland, waterways. So settlements, of course, first are along the coast, along waterways, along the Schuylkill, along, think of where Valley Forge is, right? Valley Forge Creek. It can run mills, iron forges, those sorts of things. So, long story short, the British win the French and Indian War. You've probably heard the saying after, and this comes from the French and Indian War, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Because the British Empire is massive. Literally, as the sun goes around the globe, it's hitting a piece of the British Empire, right? The problem for the Brits is that they're massive, right? And particularly here in the colonies, when you get out to, quite frankly, you get past here, going west, it's like being on the moon at this time. Barely any settlement. Yes, there are farmers, but the British are saying we need to have troops at the ready in case there are conflicts between Native American tribes and colonial settlers, right? And of course, the Native American tribes are saying, these guys aren't settling, they're showing up on our land and taking it, right? After the French and Indian War ends, the Proclamation of 1763 is passed by King George, is put forth by King George. What the Proclamation of 1763 says is there can be no colonial settlement in this new area. Native American tribes say, hey, sounds good, but we've done this dance before, right? We know what's going to happen eventually. The colonists are fuming mad. They're saying, we did not fight this to be shut out of these new lands, right? And more immigrants are coming over. First real big wave of immigration to the US. So my family, more info than you want, but just to show you, my family settled in what is called Massacre Township up by Kutztown in 1649, German settlers. I have a fourth, two fifth, and a sixth great grandfather who all fought in the Revolution. My fourth was wounded at Brandywine on 9/11/77, serves at Germantown, and then is part of the Radnor picket. And what happens here after the French and Indian War, Britain's already in debt up to their eyeballs, right? So the veterans who've served are looking for either money or land. And of course the British say, we can't pay our own troops, let alone you guys. So what do they start doing? Put through taxes. The first tax is in 1764, known as the Sugar Act, and it's a tax on molasses. What is molasses used to make? Very good. That's the answer. So back in colonial times, people would pour rum in the water because your chances of drinking water and not getting ill were slim, right? Rum is also used, you've heard of the term liquid courage. Rum is given to soldiers daily, but particularly before battle, so that when they say charge that hill, you're fired up, right? So the British are doing this to raise money to pay for troops. Now they have troops in Boston, Philly, New York, and they're using those as central points to be able to react to things. But they have smaller groups of troops in the interior. And they're saying, how do we pay for this? Let's start taxing the colonists. Londoners at this time, your run-of-the-mill Londoner is paying 29 shillings annually in taxes. The Americans, less than 1. For them, it's principle, right? No taxation without representation. Starts with the Sugar Act. We get the Stamp Act in 1765, which is a stamp has to be placed on every document, playing cards, letters, legal documents, you name it. It's a 1 penny tax. The Americans say, we're not going to pay it, and what we are going to do is we're going to boycott British goods. And this is where the role of women comes into play big time. Women are running households. They're the ones ordering goods, ordering things. Yes, most people are farmers and they're growing their own food, whatever it may be, but a lot of finished goods are coming from, clothing in particular, are coming from Europe, because the Industrial Revolution starts in England in 1750. It doesn't hit America until 1790. So all those goods are coming here. So just the threat of the boycott gets Parliament, who's getting chirped at by business owners in London and England, saying, oh my gosh, America is London's #1 market for goods. The business owners are saying to the House of Commons in Parliament, you got to get rid of this tax because they're boycotting our goods, they're not buying from us. A year later, That's what happens. The Stamp Act is repealed. The Americans say, yay, great, we love you, King George. They think the king is ordained by God, which I know, right? Whatever. We'll just leave that there. I'm actually very distantly related to Richard the Second. Not Richard the Third, like everybody wants to be, right? But Richard the Second. So anyhow, but with the repeal of the Stamp Act, Parliament also passes what's called the Declaratory Act, where they say, we can pass anything that we want to when it comes to the colonies. Americans are like, yeah, sure, whatever, you got rid of the Stamp Act. They put forth in 1768 the Township duties, another whole series of taxes: lead, paint, glass, tea. The Americans come back with a boycott threat. The British say, okay, we'll get rid of all the taxes except tea. Bingo. So, and this is how we're setting the table here. So, let me blow this picture up for you. Bear with me. If my daughter was here, she'd tell you how limited I am technologically, but you'll get to see it firsthand. So, 1768, the Township duties are taken back. Britain is still up to their eyeballs in debt, right? They have soldiers in Boston who are patrolling the streets at night just to make sure that things are going okay. March 5th, 1770, you have the Boston Massacre. And this is where we'll enter into our talk. Crispus Attucks, widely considered the first casualty of the Revolutionary era. What happens is that as Boston soldiers are patrolling, they meet up with an unruly mob of colonists who throw snowballs at them, ice chunks, oyster shells, you name it. The Brits line up, and we've all seen how British soldiers usually line up. Shoulder to shoulder, 6 across, 8 across, 10 across, 20 across, right? Reason being, their muskets aren't very accurate, but their thought is, if we can mass our fire in a direction, we're gonna hit something, right? So they line up. Their commander says, do not shoot, do not fire your weapons. Somebody yells fire, they don't know who to this day. The British fire into the crowd. You have probably seen this. One of the most famous engravings of the Revolutionary era, put forth by Paul Revere. Paul Revere is what is known as a Son of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty come about after the Stamp Act. And they're basically, some people have called them a paramilitary organization. They're not quite that, really a protest group, pardon me. Sam Adams is in this. John Hancock is in this. Dr. Joseph Warren, who's one of the most fascinating people. He dies at Bunker Hill. He's in this group. Warren is the guy who comes up with the idea for Revere's Ride, and also one by land, two by sea. He's really the head of the Sons of Liberty, still alive at this point. What do you notice about this? And this will be rhetorical, I'll answer it. But you notice how none of the British are injured in this? Because it's a massacre. That's Revere spinning the story, right? Irony of ironies. The soldiers go on trial in Boston. Do you know who defends them? John Adams, Sam's cousin. Sam Adams is saying, oh my, seriously, really? And John Adams, he has a famous quote, facts are pesky things. He says, we have to give them a fair trial to make it look like they're not being railroaded. He ends up getting most of them acquitted. A couple of the soldiers are found guilty. At that time, if you were found guilty, your first crime, as long as it isn't murder, and they weren't found guilty of murder, just, I forget the exact charge, but it wasn't murder. Their thumbs were branded. The reason for that is if you get arrested again and your thumb is branded, then you're in big trouble, right? So, the Boston Massacre, word spreads across the colonies. The engraving shows up in broadsides, newspapers, weekly magazines of the time. During this time, the colonial period, literacy rates are higher, relatively speaking, than they are today. There's no screen time, right? Thank God, the good old days, as I'm using a computer. But what people do is they read. And the other thing people do, they talk to each other, right? Good old days. So word of this spreads. The next several anniversaries of the Boston Massacre, this is the site in Boston where it happened, right outside the old State House. Nathaniel Hall, Quincy Market, it's on the Freedom Trail. I went up last year for the 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord to show you how big of a geek I am. My wife and daughter went to Belize for spring break. I wasn't invited. They said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to Lexington and Concord, of course," which was phenomenal. But I did the Liberty Trail, and the amount of people around it was amazing. Like, I literally had to wait about 10 minutes to get a picture where nobody's standing by it, on it, around it. But the next 4 anniversaries of the Boston Massacre, Joseph Warren gives the commemorative speech to show you how big of a deal he is. And for each of the speeches, there are British soldiers in the church when he's speaking, and he's taking not so veiled shots at them, you know, verbal shots. And they are, of course, stamping and booing and hissing and those sorts of things. But we then move on to, so another forgotten patriot here. So Crispus Attucks, again, big name. And let me blow this gentleman's picture up. This is James Armistead Lafayette. He is an aide to the Marquis when the Marquis comes over. What he does, he's a double agent. He's a spy. He spies on Cornwallis, actually is in Cornwallis's camp, and brings information back to the colonists, to the Continental Army, about what the British are up to. He's able to go back and forth. In the Revolution, 8,000 blacks served the cause. Not all as soldiers. Some are laborers, some are what's called wagoners, where they help to transport supplies to the army. Many do fight. The British have upwards of about 20,000. Most of the American volunteers, African American volunteers for the cause, are from the North. Some are slaves, many are not. For the British, they have some down north, they have a ton down south. Lord Dunmore, who is the Virginia governor, puts forth what is called Dunmore's Proclamation. And he says to African Americans, if you're a slave and you serve with us, if we win, you're free. So that's why more than twice, 2.5 times, I have a history degree, not math, so 20,000 versus 8,000, and they're estimates, right? But that's why so many African Americans flock to British lines. Now, it is dangerous for them to do this, particularly in the South. One, let's say you live in South Carolina and you're trying to get up to Virginia as a slave, you're a runaway. So you have people looking for you, actively looking for you. The other thing, disease, injury, those sorts of things. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna go join the army and I'll see you guys in a year or two. It was a dangerous journey. They're taking their lives into their hands. So even though they aren't supporting the cause, they're making a very risky choice by doing this, right? Lafayette, who is like this with George Washington, and we'll come back to Lafayette in a second. He comes back just before the 50th anniversary of the Declaration. He does a grand tour of all the colonies, 1824 to 1826. He ends up seeing James in Richmond in 1826 as Lafayette is being paraded, basically as the Grand Marshal, if you will. He sees James on the side of the road, stops, gets out, they embrace. So James, they have a very special relationship. Here's Lafayette. This is an older portrait of Lafayette. Of course, anyone want to guess what local town is named for? You'll have to get it right. White Marsh Township is here in Forest, otherwise. This portrait of Lafayette, so since it's my talk, this is my fantasy. This is the desk in Congress Speaker of the House stands at, or the President, or the State of the Union, right? On the wall above to the left, that portrait. That is in the House of Representatives. So it shows you how big of a deal Lafayette is, and truly is a very big deal, right? He helps to bring the French along, and then at Saratoga, the victory at Saratoga, where the French are all in. And the French aren't all in out of the goodness of their hearts, or they want to see us form a constitutional republic. They hate Great Britain. All of Europe hates Great Britain. The Spanish help us, they hate Great Britain. The Dutch help us, they hate Great Britain. Everybody hates Great Britain. Common Sense. 80 pages long. You can get it in the local library. William Jeans has it. It is a phenomenal read. Common Sense is published January 9th, 1776 in Philadelphia, Front and Market, in the print shop of Robert Aitken. When it is first published, it says anonymous. Nobody back then would sign their name to things, right? They would use names from classical literature, or they would just make up their own names. Initially, people thought Ben Franklin wrote it, or John Adams wrote it. Of course, it's Thomas Paine. Paine, one of his most famous lines in Common Sense, actually the Museum of the American Revolution has an original copy with this quote above it. We have it within ourselves to make the world new again. What's Paine talking about? Not only independence, women's rights, emancipation. He wants the whole enchilada. Lafayette wants it. Aaron Burr wants it, right? So some of the bigger names in the revolution are thinking, okay, yeah, independence is great, but this literally is a 1 in a million shot. Nobody's ever tried this. Let's get it all at once. After the revolution, Lafayette more or less confronts Washington. Lafayette is wounded at Brandywine. He's taken by an ambulance, basically a wagon cart. Washington sees him and says, oh my gosh, what has happened? Lafayette says, hey, I was shot in the foot. Washington sends his personal physician to take care of Lafayette and says, treat him like he is my son. He says that about nobody else. If you've ever been down to Mount Vernon, when you walk into the foyer, on the wall on the left, key to the Bastille that Lafayette sent to Washington. So again, they are thick as thieves. Lafayette sees Washington as a father figure. After the war, Lafayette says to Washington, why do you still own slaves? Had I known, I would not have come over to fight. And one reason Lafayette comes over to the fight, the British killed his father in the French and Indian War at the Battle of Mid. But he also, it's adventure. He's 19. I mean, 19, I think I was trying to get into Ye Old Ale House up here. But maybe, this is being taped, I should take that back. But truly, you think of at that age, and also back then, people are not living nearly as long as we are today, right? But still. So Lafayette confronts Washington on that. Here's Aaron Burr, who again, Aaron Burr also served in the Radnor Picket. Aaron Burr, of course, takes a hit after the revolution, right? With the duel with Hamilton, and then what he tries to do during the election of 1800, and then as vice president. Interestingly, I should say, I met a descendant of his who lives in Radnor. I'm giving it to, her husband is descended from Richard Henry Lee. So Richard Henry Lee of the Lee Resolution of June 7th, 1776, which is really our first Declaration of Independence. So I'm meeting with her and she's talking about Aaron Burr and giving me all this information. I love Hamilton. I think he's a stud, right? He's got his issues, but, and she says to me, she says, Jim, my family doesn't think very highly of Alexander Hamilton. And I said, I think I understand, and don't worry, I won't be a fanboy for Hamilton during your descendants talk. But just to show you how broad, and these aren't the only ones, there are many people during the Revolution who are saying, let's end slavery, let's get equal rights for women. In the Declaration of Independence, so when it's written, and of course we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of it. So the Committee of Five is created after the Lee Resolution from June 7th is tabled, because not every colony has guidance to vote for independence. Pennsylvania is probably the shakiest of all of the colonies because of John Dickinson, Robert Morris, who are not against independence. They think it's too soon. They think the British Army is going to chew up the American army and spit them out. So they're saying, if we can wait, let's do it. Dickinson, when it comes time to ratify the document, steps back and does not vote, because if he does, it will push Pennsylvania to not supporting the Declaration of Independence. Dickinson is a major name, right? Dickinson Law School at Penn State, named for him. Westtown Friends School is built on land that Dickinson donated to them back in the 1780s. So, I mean, really big deal. Point of my rambling is with the Declaration. Of course, initially they thought Adams was going to write it. Adams goes to Jefferson and says it has to be you. Jefferson did not want to be in Philadelphia. All of the action he thought was in Williamsburg. That's where Patrick Henry is. Patrick Henry isn't here, right? So Jefferson's like, oh, wasting my time here in Philly. Adams comes up to him. Committee of Five is Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Roger Sherman from Connecticut, and Robert Livingston out of New York. Adams says to Jefferson, you have to be the author of this document. And Adams is like, Jefferson says, why? Not that any of us know John Adams, but he's known to be his own biggest fan. These next three statements, and really the next two are difficult for him, he says to Adams, or to Jefferson, I'm sorry, I keep mixing them up. Here's why you have to write it. I'm obnoxious and nobody likes me. Two, and this is the key reason, you are a Virginian, and a Virginian has to be at the lead of this. Who's our first commander-in-chief of Continental Farm Forces? Washington, a Virginian. And pardon me, I'm kind of all over the place. This flag was created by George Washington. It is the commander-in-chief flag. It flies everywhere he is during the Revolution. If you've gone down to the Museum of the American Revolution and seen his war tent, this would be flying outside of it. Or when he's up at Valley Forge, this is flying outside of the Potts House. So, and Washington's a Virginian, also very important. Virginia is the biggest, most powerful colony politically and economically. Before the Revolution, everybody in the colonies, not everybody, but a large percentage, think it's the crackpots up in Massachusetts, right, who are driving the bus on this. Bringing in Virginia brings in the other half of the country and the most important colony. So, I'm obnoxious, nobody likes me, you are a Virginian, you must be at the lead of this. And then the last thing, which is like him stabbing himself, he says, you write 10 times better than I do. One of the things that Jefferson includes in the Declaration of Independence is a paragraph on slavery, blaming the king for it. Bit of a stretch. But the southern colonies say, if you leave that in, we're not signing. We're out. They want it to be unanimous. They only need 9 of 13 colonies. They want all 13. The first line of the Declaration, the unanimous, decision of the United Colonies, unanimous decision. So, I'm going to talk about Valley Forge a little bit. Von Steuben, this is the Grand Parade at Valley Forge. Von Steuben comes over. He is an aide to Frederick the Great in the Prussian army. Prussian army is arguably the best army of its time. The British would probably quibble with that, right? He speaks no English. He speaks German. He can speak and write French. So at Valley Forge, he'll speak French to a French officer who then translates it into English. The one thing he learns to do in English at Valley Forge, curse, because the soldiers drive him bananas. In his memoirs later, he writes the difference between a European army and the American army. A European army, you say, take that hill, they go. The American army, you say, take that hill, and they say, why? And then we have to tell them why, and then they'll go take the hill, right? He turns the American army around completely at Valley Forge. There are roughly 700 to 720 African American soldiers at Valley Forge. Many of them are in the Rhode Island regiments. Rhode Island where slavery is all but gone at this point, right? Rhode Island is the first state to say, we absolutely want black soldiers. Washington fights it tooth and nail initially. It's hard for me to say I love Washington. I think he's, without him, of course, and many others, we're not here. But Rhode Island says, let's do it because we need men. After the Declaration is signed in the summer of 1776, the Americans have roughly 24,000 men in the Army. By the time of Trenton, they're down to 80,000. Because a lot of men, enlistments at that time weren't all, hey, you're here for a year or 2 years. Many were 60 to 90 days. The other thing, most soldiers are farmers. They're going home for harvest, right? Some come back, some don't. So the need for more men is desperate. Not only because of enlistments, disease wipes out men. For every man, every person killed during the Revolution in battle, or as the result of, hey, shot and now they're down, 9 die from disease. You see that really through World War I. You see it a lot in the Civil War, right? You might get shot in the arm, you get an infection, and that's what kills you. This is what happens during the Revolution. The other thing is up at Valley Forge, they're in 14 by 16 foot huts, kind of the way I grew up. There are 13 of us in a small house. I can't believe it. I drive by that house today and don't know how my parents didn't just leave us. But if you're in a 14 by 16 hut with 12 other men, one guy gets sick, that's the hut. The hut's gone, right? Because men are so close together, they don't understand germ theory. It basically is, hey, here's more rum, let's see if that helps, and other things. But Rhode Island has several regiments of integrated soldiers, black men, white men. And the general, I want to give him his due. The general is, bear with me here, I'm sorry, Brigadier General James Mitchell Varnum. He proposes this Valentine's Day 1778. So the troops are still up at Valley Forge. Rhode Island does it. Any guesses the next, I'll say war to make it easier, where you have integrated regiments? Just throw out, say it. Anyone? Korea, very good. So what, and again, I'm bad at math, so what's that, 180 years later? So, I mean, crazy, right? One of the leaders of Rhode Island regiments is Nathaniel Greene, who was Washington's favorite general, right-hand man. Without Greene, they don't win the revolution. Greene is the general who goes down south with Daniel Morgan, Francis Marion, and others, and that's really what wins the revolution, because it drives the British to the coast, where they're trapped by the American army and the French fleet on the water. Greene is a Quaker. He has no military experience. His family disowns him because he fights in the Revolution. Greensboro, North Carolina, anything Greene with an E is basically named for him, rightfully so. Washington asks him to become the quartermaster general up at Valley Forge. Greene doesn't want it. His response to Washington, nobody remembers the quartermaster general, right? He ends up doing it and turns the supply situation around. Greene, so the founding fathers, and it's part of the bigger picture here, the founding fathers are thinking that slavery is on its knees, right? As far as profitability, things like that. The number one crop at the time is not cotton, it's tobacco. Americans are using, and particularly the founding fathers, are using tobacco to pay for goods from Great Britain, from Europe, finished goods, right? The problem with tobacco is it burns the soil. So this year you might get 100 hogsheads, which you're using to pay for goods from Europe, and then you put in your next order before your next year's harvest, and you say to your supplier, hey, I'll pay you 100 hogsheads next year as well. Only problem is you get 80 hogsheads. So now you're in debt, and then in debt, and then in debt, right? So the thought was, well, slavery is going to really fall off here. It's already starting to fall off precipitously in the north. irony of ironies is after the war, the state of Georgia gives Greene a farm as a way of thanks in Georgia. He dies of heat stroke. His wife brings a student from Yale down to work on the farm. The student's name, Eli Whitney. What does he invent on the farm? The cotton gin. Ken Burns in the Civil War series, and I think it's David McCullough, talks about pre-cotton gin, it would take a slave 10 hours a day to pick a pound of lint out of cotton. After the cotton gin, 1,000 pounds a day. Philadelphia, from the founding of the nation until the end of World War II, the #1 textile producing region in the world. Where's that cotton coming from, right? It's all coming up from the South. So, and again, if this was a movie, you'd say, wait, a pacifist general, not pacifist, a Quaker general's farm, guy's a big deal in the Revolution, and someone invents the cotton gin there, no chance. Well, absolutely happens there. So what we're gonna do is, I've got 2 bios on black soldiers, and then we're gonna move into Native Americans, and then we'll end on talking about women. So James Forten is 14 years old when the revolution starts. He wants to serve, he's not a slave, he lives in Philly. He wants to serve on what's known as a privateer. Privateers, there's no American Navy. So what the Continental Congress does is they say, if you own a ship, we'll give you a letter of marque, and really what we want you to do is harass British merchant ships. We don't want you to go after a man of war, go after a merchant ship, because what are those merchant ships probably doing? Supplying the troops here in the colonies. The bonus, if you capture that merchant ship, you as the privateer get to keep everything that's on the ship, and once it's sold, you get the money, and then it's divided amongst everybody on the crew. So Forten is down literally on the waterfront, sees these ships and says, oh my gosh, I want to do this. So he's on the ship called the Royal Lewis, which captures 5 British merchant ships. So he's got some cash in his pocket, right? They capture a 6th, but it was empty. So it's kind of disappointing, right? Almost like a bad meal somewhere. Forten comes back and says, this is amazing, this is fantastic. They end up going down to, where he's here in Philly, pardon me. As the French and American troops are marching from New York down to Yorktown, and they're doing this in August of 1781, they march through Philly. Forten sees the Rhode Island regiments that are integrated. 50 years later, he's talking about this. Later in life, he talks about the impression it made on him, right? 1/3 of the men in those Rhode Island regiments don't survive, because they're involved in the thick of the fighting, and disease as well. So Forten rejoins the Royal Lewis in October of '81, which is basically when Yorktown happens, right? October 19th. His captain says, hey, there are some small ships off the Virginia coast, let's go after them. They sail down the Delaware, they encounter a British ship, including a ship called the Amphion. The captain of the Amphion is John Baisley. He actually captures Forten's ship. Forten becomes a prisoner. Let me start over, sorry. At 6th and Walnut, Center City, Washington Square Park, the tomb of the unknown Revolutionary War soldier. There are thousands of soldiers buried there. They have no idea how many. Americans, British, and Hessians. From the American standpoint, many of them were prisoners of war on prison ships in the Delaware. If you're on a prison ship, you're not being fed, you're not being cared for, and again, think of disease. One guy gets sick, it goes right down the line. So Forten gets captured by the Amphion. He is going to be put on a prison ship. Forten remembers about 15 years old. Fortunately for him, the son of the captain of the Amphion is 12. The captain of the Amphion says to Forten, I want you to basically look after my son. So Forten gets to not experience initially all the bad conditions that other prisoners are going to be experiencing. Baisley says to Forten, come with me back to England. I'll get you educated, I'll get you a good job. Because of the relationship with the son, Forten, you want to talk about major chutzpah, says, no, I'm a prisoner. I am not going back to England. Treat me as the other men are being treated. And Baisley says, seriously? So he does. Forten gets put on a prison ship. He hears of an officer on the prison ship who is going to be released. He walks up to him and says, hey, can I hide in your chest that they're going to take off when you walk off? And the officer says, yes, absolutely. Forten then learns of another prisoner who is deathly ill, and he gives up the spot to that guy. I mean, again, amazing. All of this, much of this, I should say, Valley Forge Park Alliance has a site, and they have about 10 bios on there of various African Americans who were part of the Valley Forge encampment. Just fascinating. Next guy we talk about is pretty cool as well. So Forten ultimately gets released. He's up in New York. He has to walk home to Philadelphia. He stops in Trenton, where a family takes him in, feeds him, clothes him, gets him well enough so he can walk the rest of the way home. By the time he gets home, he's sick as a dog. Most men, or many men, have what's known as scurvy because they're not getting enough nutrition. He has scurvy, he gets home, his mother nurses him back to health. But again, 14 years old, and up until about the age of 16 when all this is happening. I know at 14 I wasn't doing stuff like this. That's where I was antagonizing my siblings. This next gentleman, fascinating guy, his name is Agrippa Hull. He was at the Valley Forge encampment. He is a freed black serving in a Massachusetts regiment. He is, at the age of 18, May 1st of 1777, he enlists. He serves as an orderly to a Major General John Patterson. He is at Saratoga. He fights at Saratoga, right? Which is the battle that brings the French on board with us. He is at Valley Forge from December of 77. They get up to Valley Forge. First they start in White Marsh, then they go over to Clough Mills for a short period. They're in White Marsh for quite a period. And then they go over to Valley Forge. They get to Valley Forge on December 19th of 1777. So he's there December of 77 until January of 78, and then leaves from there. Because he hooks up with Tadeusz Kosciuszko, who is one of the more famous engineers of the revolution, Polish-Lithuanian. He helps to set up defenses at battlefields. If you go up to Saratoga battlefield, there is a monument to Kosciuszko. His home, where he lived, 301 Pine Street, is a museum in Philly. He is part of the, and I never knew there was such a thing, the Polish-American Military Hall of Fame. He's in it, right? But again, just to show you how big of a deal it is, he is. Most of the defenses that he helps us set up on battlefields, and you've seen this in photos, usually it's an earthen fort with what are called abatis sticking out of them. They're pointed wooden sticks, or logs, if you will, just as a way to slow the attackers down. He helps to put these things together. He is at Valley Forge. He's everywhere, right, throughout the war, because there's a true need for engineers. You know, Duportail, who was a French engineer, is at Valley Forge. The Duportail house in Chesterbrook was where Duportail stayed during the encampment. So let me get back to, we'll save Joseph Brant for a minute. So Hull and Kosciuszko are thick as thieves. Hull accompanies Kosciuszko through the heaviest fighting in South Carolina, including the Battle of Cowpens. Battle of Cowpens is a crucial battle in the war, and it's one of the last major American victories that drive the British to Yorktown. It happens January 17th of 1781. This flag is the Cowpens flag. What flag does it look like? Right? The Betsy Ross flag. The only difference, see the star in the middle? That's the difference. A lot of plagiarism back then, right? Everyone copied everybody else's ideas. That's how I got through college, quite frankly. But that's a whole other story. So what makes an impression on Agrippa Hall is after the Battle of Eutaw Springs, he is helping wounded soldiers come in to get surgery. He dies at the age of 89. Until his dying day, he talks about all of the amputations he witnesses. And back then, you know, that's how they treat it. If you get shot here, right today, they would treat it, you know, amputation is the last thing. Back then, because of disease, they were saying, okay, well, hopefully by doing this, we get rid of the disease. Many times it's the infection post-amputation that gets you as well. So he talks about this. He resigns from the army. Hull retires from the army in July of 1783. The gentleman who signs his commission saying thank you is Washington at West Point. Hull gets an offer from Kosciuszko to go to Poland. Kosciuszko says, come on, I'll set you up, I'll take care of you. Hull says, no thanks, I'm going back up to Stockbridge, Massachusetts. He goes up there. He works with a judge to emancipate a woman by the name of Jane Darby, whom he marries. His story just gets better. After she dies, he marries a woman by the name of Margaret Tenbrook in 1813. He then adopts Mary Tilden, the daughter of a fugitive slave from New York. He has another daughter and 2 sons. He becomes one of the wealthiest farmers in his town. Wealthier than 40% of the white population. So think of back then, if you have land, now, yes, he's African American, so he's limited in the true like voting power, things like that, because if you own land, then you were able to vote, right? And you're a male, a white male. But he is well respected throughout his community. He uses his standing, his gravitas, to help other slaves escape, become free, whatever it may be. Gives them money, gives them those sorts of things. This photo is from and it's a daguerreotype, it's from 1844. Hull dies in 1848 at the age of 89. Just a fascinating guy. Also one of the biographies on the Valley Forge Park Alliance site. And it just happened to be the first one I picked. It was kind of in the middle. In fact, I'm embarrassed to say I've never heard of the guy until giving this talk. And he's just absolutely a stunning, stunning man. So we're going to move on to the role of Native Americans. So go back to the French and Indian War, Native American tribes, again, it was very much a Sophie's choice. Who do we support here? Because no matter who wins, we're probably going to lose. Land, standing, those sorts of things. So same thing happens here during the Revolution. The war affects 250,000 Native Americans who are east of the Mississippi. There are 80 tribes altogether. The ones that we're going to talk about specifically, the Iroquois Confederacy. It's six tribes together that make up the Confederacy. 2 of the tribes support the Americans. 4, or maybe 2.5 support the Americans. 3.5 support the British. And the reason many support the British is because of the Proclamation of 1763. They're hoping if the British win, that's the end of colonial expansion and settlement out west. The first Native Americans to take part in the war join on the American side. Also, Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where Agrippa Hall is from. So it's really a fascinating part of the country. They join while the British are up in Boston after Lexington and Concord, and then after, just had the anniversary, Bunker Hill on the 17th was the anniversary of Bunker Hill. So the British are surrounded by tens of thousands of militia men, Minutemen, whatnot, some Continental Army units. Washington is not at Bunker Hill because he's made commander-in-chief 2 days before the battle. Okay, so he misses it entirely. He gets up there after the fact. What you have is other Native American tribes. So the Americans take a foray up into Quebec and Canada, hoping to make it the 14th colony, and they fail miserably. It's where Benedict Arnold first gets shot in the leg. He gets shot in the same leg at Saratoga. And he's a reason why they win at Saratoga. Although he would not be happy, there is a monument to him at Saratoga. It's his leg. That's it. It's not him. That's what you get when you flip sides. Sorry. But he truly would have been, I think he would have been one of the great generals had he stayed. But he didn't. That's another talk for another time. Cherokees were one of the tribes that were split. The Cherokees are more southern, right? You have younger Cherokees who say, hey, and it's almost counterintuitive. Younger Cherokees who say, we've got to support the British. Older Cherokees are saying, wait, these guys are fighting for their independence. If they win, the British are gone. But they're also not moving that thought all the way forward to say, if the colonists win, our lands are going to also, more people are going to be coming over here. The Oneida and Tuscarora side with the Americans, whereas the other tribes side with the British. The Oneida play a crucial role, particularly while the Americans are at Valley Forge and also during the Battle of Barren Hill. So at Valley Forge, the Oneidas, you have 50 Oneida Indians who walk from upstate New York. They bring bushels of white corn to the troops in Valley Forge. Troops are very hungry, right? So there is, and we're going to talk about her in a bit, an Oneida Indian woman who prepares the food for the Americans. She stays in camp, so just helps. And women, again, play a gigantic role while the men are at Valley Forge. Valley Forge, there are 12,000 soldiers there, 3,000 die of disease. When you include camp followers, which is women, families, I mean, I can't imagine, my wife wouldn't come here today to see me talk, let alone say, hey, come to Valley Forge for the winter, right? You have 8,000 camp followers. Women are acting as nurses. They're making food, doing laundry, watching children, play a big role. Valley Forge is the 4th largest city in the colonies during the encampment. There are 20,000 people there. Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Valley Forge. Okay, so what happens is, so the Oneidas, as von Steuben is training the troops, right? So at the Grand Parade, what he does is he says to Washington, give me 50 to 100 of your best men across all regiments. I will train them, marching, drilling, all these sorts of things. And then when I think they're ready, I'm going to ask them each to train 50 to 100 men, and so on and so on and so on, right? So spring of 1778, Lafayette is chomping at the bit. And he says to Washington, give me some men. I want to go out and see if the British are in Philadelphia. I want to see if I can surprise them in between somewhere. Battle of Barren Hill. Lafayette gets basically surrounded by the British. They have the advantage. They know who Lafayette is. They know if they capture him, it's a big deal because he has connections to the royal family in France, right? France is just on board with supporting us. We get Lafayette, maybe we can say, hey, stop supporting America and we'll send him home, right? So Lafayette's got about 2,200 men out of 8,000, so it's about 25% of the American force. The British are closing in on him, and Lafayette says, okay, this isn't good. Oneida Indians who are with him help to guide him to safety. They ford the Schuylkill, which can't be fun, even though it was probably nicer than it had been all winter. But their drill from von Steuben and the help of the Oneida Indians gets Lafayette and the men back to Valley Forge. Lafayette gets up there, Washington says, what happened? And Lafayette says, hey, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to do any more stuff out there. I've seen it all, right? And then, of course, they go up to Monmouth Courthouse. And again, it's hard to talk about this with Washington. There are attacks along colonial settlements, particularly, so again, where I grew up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, There's a battle called the Wyoming Massacre, and it's called that because the Americans lost, right? But also, Indian tribes are basically killing colonial settlers who are on their land. So Washington, in response, and that's not the only instance, there are others. Washington, in response, sends a general by the name of John Sullivan on an expedition in 1779, and here's what Washington says to him. Quote, "The expedition you are appointed to command is to be directed against the hostile tribes of the 6 nations of Indians with their associates and adherents. The immediate objects are the total destruction and devastation of their settlements and the capture of as many prisoners of every age and sex as possible. It will be essential to ruin their crops now in the ground and prevent their planting more," unquote. So complete war, right? Sullivan goes on an expedition and wipes out 40 Iroquois villages, men, women, children, right? Just bad stuff. The natives call Washington, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Kono Takarius, which means destroyer of towns. Washington says to Sullivan, you know what? Just stop, it's unsuccessful. And Sullivan isn't happy with it either. He resigns. He says, I didn't really sign up to do this. Okay, that's it. The Iroquois, and we're going to talk about Joseph Brant, step up their incursions, if you will, against colonists. And we're talking 1782. So most people think the war ends with Yorktown. It doesn't, right? 1782 is what's known as the Bloody Year because you have Native Americans with loyalists fighting colonists, and more localized. No like Trenton or Princeton or Saratoga, right? It's more, hey, we're in this area, there are colonists there, let's get them. That sort of thing. And vice versa, colonists are doing the same thing. Two-way street. In the Treaty of Paris, 1783, that ends the war, so British lose, of course. I don't think I'm ruining that for anybody. In addition to recognizing independence, the British give back all that land to the colonists. All the land that they won in the French and Indian War, they say to the colonists, here you go, it's all yours. The African Americans who fought with the British, who were given the promise of, hey, if you fight with us, if you serve with us, you're going to get your freedom if you're a slave. Some do, most don't. For the Americans, you have some black soldiers who fight, who are slaves, or who serve. Let me put it that way, who serve. They get freed, but when it comes time to get a pension, government has zero money. But what the Continental Congress says is, so yeah, you served, but you know what? You didn't carry a gun, so it doesn't count, which is nuts. And ultimately, those things get figured out. And the Native Americans are not involved in any way, shape, or form in the Treaty of Paris. So they get completely overlooked, and in their mind, fill in whatever verb you want to put there. They just feel like they get the short end of the stick. The Lenape, however you want to say it, tomato, the Delawares, that we know how to say, right? They, during the war, so of course that's the tribe who Penn first makes connections with, right? They say, you know what? We would want to support the Americans in this war, but we're going to stay out of it because it's a civil war. It truly is a civil war, right? Because it's loyalists versus patriot. It's Englishmen against Englishmen, basically. What they do is they move west and they say, we'll let this all simmer down, we'll come back and figure it all out. So some of them are involved, not many. This gentleman is Joseph Brant. He was noted in the Ken Burns series. He's usually when you talk about Native American warriors, he is the first one during the Revolution who's brought up. He's a Mohawk leader and diplomat. He rallies 4 of the 6 Iroquois Confederacy nations to support the British, and he leads those raids, devastating raids on colonists, particularly in New York and Pennsylvania. Okay? His sister is Molly Brant. Now, the tough thing about this time period, there aren't a lot of photos, right? So you're going off of portraits. This was painted in 1986. His sister, Molly Brant, was instrumental in negotiating with the British to maintain Iroquois loyalist alliances, okay? And again, remember, not all the Iroquois are on board here. She uses her diplomatic skills to rally indigenous support to the crown. This is Joseph Lewis Cook. He's an Oneida Indian, and I'm sorry, it's actually a cool portrait, but it's not you can't see it very well. He's an Oneida Abenaki war chief, supports the Americans. He's the highest ranking Native American in the Continental Army. Washington loves him. He serves as a trusted scout and commander. He's at Saratoga. He's at a battle in upstate New York called Oriskany. It's part of a campaign as they're working their way up towards Saratoga. Joseph Lewis Cook. Hold your thought on this one. There's a woman by the name of Polly Cooper. Remember I talked about an Oneida woman who plays a huge role at Valley Forge? Polly Cooper, P-O-L-L-Y. Brings food down, makes the food. She stays behind with the army, right? And just plays such a big role, the Oneidas do, at Valley Forge. Nancy Ward, this is her grave in Benton, Tennessee, of all places. She is a Cherokee. Although most of the Cherokee are aligned with the British, she's not. She's with the Americans. She uses her position, she is an elder in the Cherokee community. She uses her position to promote peace. And the other thing she will do, so remember we were talking about Brant and how he leads raids onto colonist settlements in New York and Pennsylvania? She actually tries to warn colonists that trouble is coming before the raid takes place. Women in the Revolution. Again, generally speaking, women play such a big role. Okay, we're going to highlight several, some you've probably heard of. Of course, first and foremost, Abigail Adams, right? She's not only up here because she's married to John Adams. Remember, he says, I'm obnoxious and nobody likes me. She's the same. My wife would probably say the same thing about me, but she's not here, so she can't, right? Abigail Adams. If any of you saw the John Adams series on HBO, the frightening episode is when she is inoculating her kids against smallpox. You would put pustules on a little linen strip and then basically insert it under the skin and cross your fingers. Washington had smallpox when he was a young adult down in the Caribbean, but he survived, thank God, right? Good news is, if you survive the inoculation, you're never going to get smallpox. Maybe not as good news, if you die, you're never going to get smallpox, right? Washington uses a wide spread smallpox inoculation during the Revolution. Before the Revolution, mortality rates from smallpox anywhere from 30 to 50%. After the mass inoculation, single digits, 2%, which is crazy, right? I mean, just amazing that they're able to figure all that out. The letters between her and John are some of the best records to this day. They're online at the National Archives and at the Massachusetts Historical Society. Washington, before he dies, says to his wife, whichever one of us survives, burn our letters. That's why there are a lot of Washington wartime letters between commanders, very few, if any, between him and Martha. Thomas Jefferson, when his wife dies, burns their letters. He does not want anybody to read them. The other great source of letters from this time period, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Hundreds of letters from about the 1810s until their death on the 50th anniversary of the 4th of July, which is crazy, right? You talk about Hollywood trying too hard. But she also, very famous line that she has in one of her letters to John when they're putting the new government together. remember the ladies, right? John's response, ha 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 ha, kind of laughs it off. She didn't think it was funny, right? I've been in those shoes. But truly, big name, right? Big name during the Revolution. And you could say, you think of how the role of First Lady has changed dramatically, right? Some of our first ladies are more ceremonial, right? But the more modern First Ladies, and I think it really starts with Eleanor Roosevelt, being heavily involved, civically doing things for the country, and of course, more recent. She is probably seen it because she was John's right-hand person, right? Because again, nobody really liked Adams. He's a bit cantankerous. He is a little bit obnoxious. His wife is with him through thick and thin, so plays a gigantic role. Any guesses? Molly Pitcher, right? They believe this woman's name is Mary Ludwig Hayes. However, Molly Pitcher, easier to market, right? They use her story to inspire people after the Battle of Monmouth. Battle of Monmouth, warmer than probably like yesterday was, right? Really warm day. Soldiers from both sides are wearing wool uniforms. Scores of them, not scores, dozens die from heat stroke. What a way to go, right? Particularly because they're not drinking water. What are they drinking? What we were talking about? They're drinking rum, right? Molly Pitcher initially starts bringing water out to soldiers, but then when her husband is killed manning a cannon, she takes over. She is not the only woman, and again, it's Mary Ludwig Hayes. She's not the only woman to fight in the Revolution. We're going to talk about one other. But of course, she represents all women and their contribution during the Revolution. Phyllis Wheatley. This statue is in Boston. Phyllis Wheatley is a slave when the Revolution starts. She writes a book of poetry. Back then we were talking about it, literacy rates are high, right? Entertainment is you either talk to people or you read. Just to go back to common sense, in the first year, 500,000 copies are published in a population of 2.5 million people. It's the #2 bestseller of all time. I ask this question all the time. Do you know what the #1 bestseller is? I got that wrong. I went to Catholic school for 12 years and I got that wrong. So clearly not going to happen right away. I'm sure I'm going to make a stop somewhere. But she writes a book of poetry and it's about the Revolution. It takes off like wildfire. Initially, people have no idea she's a slave. She writes a poem about Washington, meets Washington, and reads it to him. So she becomes one of the popular authors of the day, and also exemplifies that, she's not, and I shouldn't say she's not just a slave, but there's more to her than, so shining a picture on how slaves are just being shortchanged, of course being treated cruelly, but also being shortchanged. Sybil Ludington. So there's a new book out called The Ride, and it talks about Paul Revere. Paul Revere rode 20 miles from Boston out to, and maybe a little bit more because he gets captured at one point, doesn't exactly take a straight line out to Lexington and Concord. Sybil Ludington is a teenager from Dutchess County, New York. She rides 40 miles to warn local towns that the British have burned towns in Connecticut and that regulars are coming this way. She is a teenager. Again, her story isn't known. So same thing with Revere. What makes Revere famous? The Longfellow poem a century later. And people are like, oh yeah, big deal. Well, that's when her story comes out. Her story is also told apparently in this new book, The Ride, which has been getting rave reviews. I haven't read it. I gave this talk last night and somebody read it and they're like, oh my God, you have to get it. It's a great read. They named a small part of the town where she grew up, they named it Ludingtonville after her. So again, teenager. And I think about the same age as James Forten was when he did his thing. Deborah Sampson. This is in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, which I'm not sure where that is. I gotta guess it's a little bit west of Boston. She fights disguised as a man during the Revolution. Nobody knows. She takes the name of her brother-in-law who was killed during the Revolution. Says, I'm Robert Shirtliff, I believe his name was, or Shirtleaf. She gets wounded in a battle, shot in the forehead, survives, shot in the thigh. Regimental doctor treats her head wound, goes to treat her thigh wound, and she says, I got this. I'll take care of it, because she doesn't want her secret out. She writes that she used a knife and a sewing needle to get the bullet out of her thigh. It's not until after the Revolution that her story comes out. She is initially denied a pension, fights for it, gets it. One of the true success, I mean, and again, like, talk about legends. She, after the Revolution, settles, family, kids. This statue is outside the Uxbridge Public Library. She goes on kind of like this, I don't think with the star jacket, does a speaking tour about her experiences during the war. And people are like, oh my God, amazing. I think I have one more, let me see. Oh no, that's it, that's it. So, again, thank you all for coming and sitting through this. I could not sit through this. But I really do appreciate your interest in coming here. But thanks also to White Marsh Township for making this great site available. It's just, you couldn't pick a better site on Juneteenth to talk about this. So any questions, please fire away. The one thing I want to let you know, back by Tom, is I left my business card, which has my website on it, The Local History Geek. I know what you're thinking, no one else took that site. But it's also got my email. On my site, underneath this picture, is a it's a box with an arrow, a red box with an arrow. I've got about 50 videos that I did, most during COVID, during lockdown, drove my wife crazy. Started with the French and Indian War, got to the Civil War, and then she said, stop or else, so I had to. But I also have a calendar of talks. I've got another talk coming up a couple weeks at William Jean's, but also many locally throughout the rest of the year. So I will stop there. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I appreciate your deep dive into history and tying it to our local history.
Right.
So I'm sort of curious, all our hills around here, given the technology that was available at the time, it seems like climbing a tree on a hill must have been a very crucial way to have observation of that.
Very much so, and always the high ground, right? You always want the high ground, even at other key battles. So at Trenton, the Americans have the high ground. Now, not that Trenton's on the top of a mountain, but if you're just slightly above the enemy coming at you, that's a big deal. The other thing, so you talk about climbing up a tree, really cool thing that the Americans did during the Valley Forge encampment is it started at Aronimink, where the PGA just was. There was what was called a signal oak tree. Washington is concerned because the British, while they're in Philadelphia, are running all over Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware County looking for food and horses and wood and all those sorts of things. His concern is if one of his men gets picked off with a letter or plans or those sorts of things, what they do to try to limit it is they use what's called Washington's beacons. So if somebody is given a torch, they climb up a tree, that tree can be seen in the next town. And it basically was a signaling system to Valley Forge to say that, watch out, the British are headed out of Philadelphia, right? He also uses it along the Watchung Mountains in New Jersey, along the coast. What they do is they use bonfires so that if they see British ships coming, big bonfire starts 5 miles away, next bonfire, it's just a chain of, because again, no cell phones, no walkie-talkies, right? But to your point, absolutely, topography plays a huge role. I should have warned you, every answer you're going to get to a question is at least 5 minutes. But what happens is the Americans, and they learn these tactics during the French and Indian War from Native American tribes. British, as I talked about before, they're normally out in the open, shoulder to shoulder, however many across, right? Because if they mass their fire, they're going to hit something that way, because their weapons aren't very accurate. What the Americans do, they use cover, they use topography, they'll hide behind a fence, on top of a hill, whatever it may be, and the British consider that ungentlemanly. It's nuts. I would not be standing in the open, right? And what are the British known for, really, during a battle? So after they shoot their shot, bayonet charge, right? Which is terrifying, because the bayonet back then, it wasn't just a knife. It was a triangular bayonet, so that if you got stuck, again, think about infection, think about God knows what else. Many men die from bayonet. Hugh Mercer is the highest ranking Continental Army officer. He's bayoneted 7 times at the Battle of Princeton because he won't surrender. He basically says to the British, go jump in a lake, and they bayonet him. He dies about a week later. But yeah, no, topography, huge deal, and that's where Native American tribes come in too. They say, hey, you know what? If you go a mile this way, better land, right? And it plays such a huge role, as opposed to the British marching out in the open, and they're trying to use psychological terror, right? Oh my God, it's a huge force, and even think about Lexington and Concord. On the retreat back from Concord, the British are getting hit from every direction because guys are in houses, guys are behind trees, behind fences, whatever it may be. So yeah, absolutely. It plays, and it really helps to level the playing field, because the British have a professional army, the Americans really don't. So very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes?
So you started the talk by saying, Juneteenth is celebrated roughly 2 years after the Civil War ended.
Right.
So how long did it take to get the word out to all the colonies?
So not nearly as long. It takes them a while to get, to your point, news of the Declaration. So there's the famous Trumbull painting, right? There's the famous Trumbull painting. It's arguably one of the most famous paintings. It's, the Committee of 5 presenting a draft of the Declaration. So John Hancock and Charles Thompson are the only 2 to sign it on July 2nd. Thompson lives at Harridan House in Bryn Mawr. He's the recording secretary for the Continental Congress. Most men don't sign it until August. Some men don't sign it until November. And it takes even longer. Think of Savannah, Georgia, which literally is like being on the other side of the earth at this point. You talk about like travel and infrastructure and those sorts of things. They don't learn about the Declaration for months, right? Philadelphia, of course, they know right away. It's read on July 8th in the State House Yard, Independence Hall Yard. July 9th, Washington reads it to the troops in New York City, and they pull down the statue of King George, right? As far as the Revolution, it takes a while. Washington doesn't truly learn about the French support from Saratoga until May of 1778, 7 months after that battle. So to your point, it takes a long time for information to travel. And think also the folks back in London, right? They're getting battle reports 6 months after the battle's taken place. And then when they react and send it back, maybe not 6 months, maybe 3 to 4 months. But when they send responses back saying, hey, do this, do that, it's another 2-3 months, like not really timely, right? But yeah, it's another obstacle that they have to work with or against at that point. As opposed to, today it's instantaneous, right? You could have a friend in London, send them a text, and they get it, you think, right away. So, good question. All right, folks, if that's it, if you want to, I'm going to hang out for a little bit. If you want to ask me, outside of the group, feel free. But again, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Craig, I might need your memory on this one, but following up on what you were just asking about, how long it took to let folks know. The township just had been given a gift last week, actually, on the 6th, earlier this week, the 16th, from a gentleman affiliated with, township resident, affiliated with the National Parks Association. When the Declaration of Independence was signed, there was a print shop, the Dunlap Unlock print shop, 4 blocks away. And the gentleman took a copy of it, ran back to the print shop, printed off 200 copies to submit this throughout the colonies. And so we want to get the word out. With that, they think there's 30 of them existing today. The National Park Service this year decided they were going to commemorate this by doing a limited edition printing of this. It's called Broad Street.
Dunlap Broadside.
Thank
what it's
you.
known as.
Dunlap Broadside print. And this gentleman got number 77 of the limited edition and donated it to the township, to the board of supervisors. At their meeting, the township has had it framed, and it's going to be hanging in the township building, which is a really neat tribute for the American 250.
For sure.
And just really interesting irony.
Right. Well, and literally right down the street, if you will, in Germantown, Clifton, which was the focus of the battle, was owned by the Chu family. There are still Chu family members running around Radnor. I know one of them well. He's about 87, 88. He'll kill me for saying that on camera. But he told me how his family in the 1970s found a Dunlap broadside in Clifton hiding in a desk drawer. They sold it to Malcolm Forbes for $1 million. Wow. Malcolm Forbes then sold it in the late 90s to Norman Lear for $8.5 million. So the Chu family said if we'd only waited a little bit longer, but very cool stuff. Yeah, very neat. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Jim's
My pleasure.
amazing.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
I would tell you that I had no idea Jim was this intelligent from all those years ago when we used to.
This helps.
I'll tell you. And his first gig, I called him up when we were young. It was like 27 years ago, roughly. And I called him up and said, Jim, I need a Santa. He goes, what do you mean? I go, you'd be perfect. I need a Santa for this holiday thing I'm doing. So Jim shows up. I'm not sure if you were married to
I wasn't. We were dating. My wife and I were dating.
She came as an elf. My wife went as an elf. Jim showed up as Santa, and I knew he'd be great because of his personality. I didn't perceive Jim's size, okay, as he was coming down this staircase with pillow stuff, and he had his height. It was. He had all these pillows, but his size, and the kids just looked at him. He was the biggest Santa anybody ever saw. So you've come a long way. I mean, here we are, from Santa to speaking where Frederick Douglass.
Exactly.
I'll tell you.
Not bad. Thanks.
So I would be totally remiss, and it's a little bit of save the best for last, is I have to send our township gratitude to Roy Wilson and his wife Ann, who Roy's been fantastic with helping us with the site and with doing history tours for us, and just kind of getting us out of the gates with trying to get the public engaged. And when today came about, weren't sure, I said to you earlier, how this whole thing was going to play out. I said to Roy, hey, do you need me there, Tom? You know, and Roy's regimented and wants to know what he's going to do. And I'm like, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to, I could use you. And he's like, well, what am I going to say? And I go, you're kind of going to be filler. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, it's going to depend on how things are rolling. I might need you to give it to her. I might not. I go, but just let's go with it. And you've been fantastic. So thank you so much. Very lucky to have you. Based on the special events of the day, and I think it's important, I'm a big fan of commemorating. You look at Jim with the pictures today. Is his first one we've ever had, and I'd love to, we're going to move some stuff out of the way, get a picture of the entire group for our first ever, it's Juneteenth ever at White Marsh, but also in particular at Abolition Hall, and how special that is. So if you can sit tight for a minute while we move a couple things, and then we're going to get you out and get you on your way here shortly. And thank you so much.
I just want to say one thing before we go. Let's give Tom Blomstrom a round of applause.
Well done.
We are team. We are Team White Marsh.